Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cognitus webinar series where we talk about some of the biggest business challenges and the best IT solutions to address them. For our webinar series today about IFRS 16 compliance and reporting, we've had such a huge registration. I'm so happy to be here today talking to you, but let's give people a few minutes to join. I've seen a lot of people from across different regions join and some still joining. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people from across the world who've joined us for this webinar. And I promise you it's going to be an exciting one. So let's give just a few more seconds before we start. All right, I think we have a full house, and in the essence of time, let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic for today is IFRS 16 compliance and reporting. And to discuss how we choose the best tool to enable us to do that is Budi Rachman. Budi is the chief architect of Hamilton, a solution designed to do just that. Welcome to the show, Budi.
Thank you, House. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for joining again. Budi, I want to start to set some context for our audience here. A lot of us know what IFRS 16 compliances are, but for some people to whom this topic might be new, could you please give us some highlight and tell us at a high level, what is IFRS 16 compliance?
So basically, IFRS is trying to standardize accounting regulations. Specifically for IFRS 16, IFRS is trying to standardize accounting standards just for leases. Okay, in current standards, there are many versions of leases accounting standards, like in the US or in Asia, and also different industries, they may have a different practices. So the idea, standardize accounting regulations.
Makes sense. So Budi, what makes it so complicated to comply with it?
Easy. So I'll give you an analogy. If you have, it's very easy to manage different things in different ways. But when you start trying to, glue all those things together into a single common thing, that becomes complex, right? Because we need to cater all the permutation and combinations from different industries or different countries. So new regulations also need more data in order to execute the new use cases, okay, given by IFRS 16, the new regulations, right? So these things make things difficult, and sometimes it's not feasible for human to do it anymore, especially if the organization has a lot of leases contracts, a lot of agreement with the vendors or the customers, then they must use a proper tool to do it.
Right, and so how can a tool actually help an organization achieve this compliance?
Well, I can give you three generic guidance. The first one, of course, the tool has to produce the end goals. The end goals are disclosures, right? Disclosures has to be produced in accurate and on-time ways. And also the tools need to produce disclosures based on a customer's applicable use cases, right? That is the first one. And the second one, the tool should not add additional burden to the organizations. So it should be non-disruptive approach to the current business process, so they can adopt the new regulation with ease. And the third one, this is also important for them, because regulation is keep changing, right? Today they may say, okay, you apply this regulation A, but tomorrow the regulation may change to something else, right? Or they may add additional regulations, like what we have now during the pandemic time. Okay, so during the pandemic time, IFRS introduced additional regulations to handle with COVID-19. So this is something evolving. Every single day, there will be new things. So the tools should be able to manage, to support not just existing requirements, but also for future ones. So therefore, when the organizations implemented the tool, they will not need to buy additional tool, or they will not need to reconfigure the whole thing when the regulation is changed, or maybe there is additional regulations introduced, right? So this is what we call it.
I think you really summarized the answer to the first question quite well, right? So a tool that is designed to achieve the end goal, which is compliance and reporting. Yes. Secondly, non-disruptive, because complying to regulations is not a full-time job. People actually have another job, and if it's too disruptive, people won't adopt the tool, and even the best tools may lose out on creating value if users refuse to use it. And finally, I think you touched upon the adaptability part of it, which made a lot of sense to me, that without a tool being able to adapt and bring in changes in the regulations to practice, right? So this regulation is still evolving. There is so many more things that are coming to surface, and even otherwise, right? As you mentioned, COVID presented its own challenges and required business to comply with new regulations, which may have been bundled with the IFRS 16 as well.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. You touched a little bit about data from multiple places coming in, lots of permutation, combination. So complexity seems to be inherent for at least the large organization when it comes to the IFRS 16 compliance. Could you share some use cases that a tool can handle?
Okay, so the tool can handle all the use cases, okay, according to the manual, the one that given by IFRS. For instance, like managing subleases, sell and leaseback, intercompany leases, or foreign transactions, etc. So the challenge is not just the use cases. Use cases, we have a list of use cases, so the customers can choose what are the applicable use cases for them. So the challenge is basically when they have a particular use cases, right? So these use cases needs set of data, and sometimes not all the required data exists in the current environment. So they need to find a way on how to fulfill the gaps, to fulfill the missing data. So how the tool can help them? So the tool can help them first. We identify on the day one itself, once the business decided, okay, these use cases are applicable for them, the tool will tell them what kind of data, okay, what kind of required data for them, okay, in order to execute the use cases. So we tell them these are required data. So that's the tool can do. And the second thing, let's say if they encounter data gaps, right? The tool can provide them a guidance, okay, based on implemented a project in the past. So we can share what we have implemented, and they can do kind of benchmarking whether the solution can be applied to them. So we can give them kind of options if they really encounter this kind of data gap challenge.
Now that's very interesting. One of the things that that I always wonder about is that there's so many nuances to each contract, right? And how do I figure whether this contract requires the elements of IFRS 16 compliance or not? So how do we, auditors can't be called in for every contract, right? Or every type of contract that comes in. So how can a tool help us automate that process?
Interesting questions. Yes. Traditionally, organization may hire experts. We call it IFRS experts, right? To help them analyze and understand the existing requirement, the existing processes, or the existing data, the existing contracts. But this process, yes, possible for the first period when the first stage when they try to analyze the existing situations, right? But for the long run, it becomes costly and not feasible anymore because they cannot hire these experts to stay with them forever. So
Right.
Some organizations, they may train their own people to be an expert, right? That is a traditional way. But Hamilton, we have a built-in what we call it expert system. It's an AI style approach. So instead of having a physical expert, we are trying to digitalize the expert knowledge into the systems. So the system will analyze the data, like the one that you mentioned, have a lot of information, trying to understand the data. Then also, end of the day, we'll come up with suggestion or conclusions, right? So system will say, oh, these contracts, yes, it is a lease contract, or it's a short-term lease, or it is a low-value asset according to the definitions given by IFRS. Once the conclusion is given by the machine, then the users, they just need to say, yes, I agree, please go to the next stage, or I need to do a further analysis, further checking on the data. So, but most of the time, 99%, the suggestion given by the system approved by the human. In this case, maybe accounting manager or a finance controller, when they said, yes, I agree with the suggestion from the systems, then goes to the next stage. So this will save time in terms of analyzing the data because we don't need humans. And second thing, it's so cost effective because the need of expert now digitalized into the system itself.
Interesting. So you did mention about your solution, Hamilton, and how it can help the customers identify with each contract whether it needs to be compliant or not, and then move it in through the process. Correct. So I wanted to dive a little deeper. Tell us a little bit more about this solution and how does it meet the benchmark that you set earlier in the conversation? The three important things to look for in the right tool. How does Hamilton comply with all the three? So a little bit about Hamilton and how it complies.
Okay, Hamilton is an accounting automation tool. So Hamilton was built not to tackle a particular IFRS requirements. So Hamilton is a generic tool to manage all accounting automation needs. So IFRS 16 is the example of these accounting automations requirement. So the tool, using this use case driven approach, will identify applicable use cases for IFRS 15, not just IFRS 15 or 16 or 17, so any IFRS. So the tool first will identify the applicable use cases. Okay, we have use cases repository that the customer can choose based on those repositories, which use cases applicable for them. Once they decided this use case is applicable for them, then we can run a POC for them. We can simulate the data, we can simulate the calculation, we can simulate disclosures. Okay, so that is the how the tool works, right? But the most important thing, like I have mentioned, besides producing accurate disclosures, the tool will not add additional burden to the organizations because the tool will be embedded to their customers' system landscape with silent, right? So the system will collect the data from other systems, calculate this data, and on top of existing accounting practice, the system will send the corrections. So the data, the existing data still running as it is for current reports, but the tool will produce another set of accounting corrections to make sure the organization compliance with the new standard. So this is what we call it non-disruptive approach, right? Okay. So actually, basically users is not, they don't realize actually they're already compliant, right, with the new accounting standards because the tool runs silently in the background. So the third one, the tool can help the business by having a large repositories of use cases. These use cases, not just for a current or existing requirements, these use cases also can be configured to support the future requirements. Like I have mentioned earlier, IFRS just introduced a regulation on how to deal with COVID-19, right? So by just changing, setting a bit in the configuration, then the system able to manage these new regulations, right? So this is the main thing of Hamilton. And the beauty, and another thing, the beauty of Hamilton, we also implemented a heavy AI things and predictive accounting, which is quite different compared to classical accounting, because classical accounting records things that already happened, something that's already done. That's the purpose of accounting, right? Recording something that already done. You debit something, you credit something. But Hamilton introduced one step ahead of a classical accounting. We call it a predictive accounting. So if the client using a predictive accounting, the system can produce the double entry, the debit and credit, not for something that already happened, but something in the future. So why we need these ones? Because now the organization want to see the impact to the balance sheets, the impact to the income statement, something, let's assume they run the what if simulation, the COVID-19, runs, the COVID-19 continues till next year. What will happen to their business? What will happen to their leases contracts? Do they need to change some things in their strategy or policy? So Hamilton can provide that information, can run the what if simulations, right? So that is the beauty, and not just producing numbers, right? But producing, the most important thing, producing the double entry itself, which is the core of accounting processes.
That's fantastic. No solution today without AI in the market, right? So AI elements are very, very important, and I really like the concept that you introduced about predictive accounting. So Budi, you said you've implemented AI and it can handle all the complexities. Can you give us an example of some of the organizations where you may have implemented the Hamilton solution and how it handled large volumes of data?
Okay, so we have a customers who, this customer is a very large organizations, and they have around 300,000 these contracts. And of course, because the number of contracts is huge, and when they send the data to the systems immediately analyze the contracts, whether the contracts falls under which category, whether the contracts in scope of IFRS 16 or not. Okay, so once the data pass the first filter, then it will go to the second stage, of course, after approval given by the human, right? Once the approval has been given, the next stage will be processed, which is the calculation itself. So the calculation will produce various numbers depending on the use cases. It can be just present value of lease payments, or can be a tier pricing, can be subleases, sell and leaseback, lessor accounting. So there are so many use cases. So the system will calculate numbers based on applicable use cases, right? So once the data calculated, then it will reside in the system as a sublease systems, right? So the user now can analyze the data. They can produce pro forma disclosures, right? Without even the need to wait until end of the month. They can produce, we call it pro forma disclosures. Earlier, they can analyze the data. Once they agreed with the numbers, right? So month-end process will be very quick and simple. They just push the data back to the main accounting systems. So let's say if I run my month-end closing for August, then the system will send the data for August. But the data in the system in Hamilton is not just for August. The data will be calculated all the way till end of the contract, till the future. And also the users can put the what if simulation in the future, right? So not just having for disclosures or just for compliance, but also for analysis for the future's situations, right? That is the most important thing.
And Budi, I already have some great questions on the Q&A and chat panel here. So one of the questions from our participant, Julia, is to know who are the different stakeholders that get access to and use Hamilton, and can they collaborate online as well?
Yeah, so basically accounting users are content, financial controls. So people in that, departments. However, now, because we are so integrated now, so even though traditionally the tool being used by finance or accounting department, but now people from other departments like purchasing departments, they need to see also what the tool says about their future payments, their future what if scenarios, because they may need to adjust their purchasing budget. They may need to adjust their negotiation with the vendors. So the tool extended not just for accounting finance department, but also can be extended to be used for purchasing departments. But the most important things, the tools will be used by the auditors, because the auditors will go directly to the system and check all the transactions. That is I think the end users of IFRS are all auditors, right? Because they are the one will check the data, will check the accuracy, will check all the contracts, whether all the contracts are according to IFRS compliance. Yeah, so these are the main stakeholders.
And Nathan asked another very interesting and fun question, so I'm just going to put it out there for you. He said, this sounds fantastic, and you've spoken a lot about user adaptability. Could you just show us a quick demo of the system and show us some of the key features?
Yeah, sure. Okay, just give me a second. Let me try to log into the system.
It's always more fun to when the rubber meets the road, isn't it, Budi? So what a great question. Thank you, Nathan, for asking. And let's put Budi on the spot. Let's ask him to show us what he got. And, put a face to the name Hamilton.
Yeah.
And, while talking about this, Budi, interesting choice of names. How did the name Hamilton come about?
Oh, okay. So when early stage, when we develop the solution, we encounter a challenge, a mathematical challenge, right? So the team trying to solve these mathematical challenge using a different algorithms. So we found there is an interesting old algorithms, not old mathematical formula written by Hamiltons, which I didn't know the Hamilton actually is the Hamiltons that in the US, the one that on the $10 notes. This guy is very smart. So though he was a politician, but he was a mathematician as well. So he wrote something interesting. And the formula that written by him, okay, and published on Google, we found it on Google, solved our problems. So that's why
that truly is interesting, Budi. That is an interesting fact check. Eh?
Yeah.
So all right. So let's see the demo.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, House, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, absolutely, Budi.
So here, as I have mentioned, our tool is not just for IFRS 16. Many solution providers today, they're trying to fulfill IFRS requirements with a different tool, IFRS 15, another tool, IFRS 16, another tool, and now IFRS 9 or 17 different tool. But Hamilton trying to complete all these requirements with a single solution. So here we have give you a simple demo here. We have what we call it the lease contract dashboard. So I'm trying to retrieve my last 10 contracts created by the systems. So when the new data coming in, the first thing that the system will do to analyze the data, right? So the data has, the user has to a complete set of questionnaires, right, that we have configured in the systems. And based on the answers given by the users, okay, and the knowledge that put into the system, so we call it the Hamilton expert systems, which is AI approach. So the system will analyze the answers and provide the conclusions. So based on the answers given by the users, the system says, oh, these contracts, yes, indeed, part of IFRS 16 scope, or maybe the contract is a short-term contract, low-value contract, whatever the event, whatever the conclusions the expert says, we can put it into the systems. So once the system says, yes, this is the contract is a lease, but if you see here, not yet authorized, it means the user not yet authorized. If the user says, if I were the user and I said, okay, this is okay, then I just need to authorize it. So once it is authorized, so level 2 authorization has been provided. So now change, the conclusion has been changed. The contract is a lease that has been authorized by level 2 authorizations. So it means now the contract ready for the next step, the next stage, which is the calculations. So once it goes to the next stage, so the system will try to identify what kind of data it is, whether it is for IFRS 15, 16, sublease, sell and leaseback, so whatever it is. So then system will apply a proper set of calculations, a proper formula to run the calculations. So in these examples, the system run calculations for a normal lease inceptions, then produce what we call it a predictive accounting. So predictive accounting, yeah.
Budi, before we move, I don't want to go too far from the topic, but you said it will find out and tell us which IFRS compliance is applicable to this transaction. So you're saying this one system can address multiple IFRS compliances? Because traditionally we've seen that silo, right? As many compliances, that many tools required. So I just want to check and confirm that what you said is clearly understood.
Yes, it is. What you understood is correct. So the tool is not just for a particular IFRS, all right, in this example, IFRS 16. So we can use also the tool for IFRS 15. So there are many people asking me, hey, how can you provide the solutions that can address so many IFRS different requirements? My answer is simple, because we are using what we call it use case driven approach. So use case driven approach, we don't build everything in a single tool, right? I mean, we not build, let's say IFRS 16, we not build Hamilton just for IFRS 16. Instead, we decentralize the solutions. So if in analogy, if you are thinking like a federal government system, Hamilton is a federal system. So federal system doesn't need to know whether use case for IFRS 15, use case for IFRS 16, use case for IFRS 9, but the federal system just need to govern a common thing for those IFRS, right? So who will be handling specific IFRS use cases? So if I have use cases for IFRS 15, then we'll launch use cases just to tackle IFRS 15 requirements. But the central system, yeah, the central system is still the same, which is Hamilton, which is
that is amazing, yeah. Budi. I know that there is so much more to share, and we're almost coming towards the end of the time. So just to recap, the solution is purpose driven, right? It's created for IFRS compliance. It's one solution for all compliances versus one for one, which seems to be another unique factor. And I'd love to, in our upcoming webinar, learn more about other use cases as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
really shown us a lot of features. You've also told us that not only is this tool good for IFRS 16 compliance, you can use it for practically all the IFRS 16 compliance. There is so much to cover with you, Budi. I always feel 30 minutes with you are always too less, but then we're almost up on time, and I'd like to set up another webinar series soon with you to talk about the other compliances that you cover, and perhaps we could use some real life customer examples on that as well.
Yeah, that will be great.
Thank you again. I really want to thank our audience who've taken so much time to join us. I hope this webinar truly added value to you in learning about how a tool can be used to simplify the compliance process, not only compliance, but also reporting. If you want to get in touch with us, if you want to know more, we're always here for you. Keep sending us questions, keep sending us topics for the webinars that you want us to cover. And if you want to contact me, it's Harsh Mishra, and I'm always available on sales@cognitusconsulting.com. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.